today we're going to talk about interviews. So the first part of this for today is we're going to talk about types of interview questions. You have to recognize that there are different types of interview questions, and you have to be prepared for both types. So let's get started with those. So there are two key types of interview questions. You have your technical questions and you have your behavioral questions, okay? So we're going to go deeper into this, and we're also going to try and cover some examples so you have a better idea of what to expect with each of these interview types. When it comes to technical interview questions, these are typically related to hard skills. If you guys remember from when we talked earlier in the week, we talked about hard skills, and hard skills are the skills that you really need to perform the job. Those are the more technical skills like coding, website development, right? Audit knowledge and testing knowledge. Those are the things that are hard skills. So when you're talking about technical interview questions, that's what they mean. And I put a few examples here that I'm going to walk through because I think that would help you to understand what I mean by technical interview questions. So the very first one is one that's generic. Again, remember this Break into Tech Challenge is really about different fields. It's not just any specific field. So the very first one is, tell me about your experience with a specific role. So let me give you an example. So I have people here that say they want to be in GRC or IT audit. I have people that want to be in project management or cybersecurity. Whatever role it is that you want to go into, one of the questions you should expect from a technical interview perspective is you explaining what you've done in that role. So that goes back to making sure that you actually fully understand what needs to be done in that role. That's how you're going to be able to show them that you know how to perform the tasks. So whatever role you're choosing to go into, and I have a few examples here that we'll go through for different areas, but what if whatever field you're trying to go into, you absolutely need to be able to explain to them what it is that you actually do day in, day out, because that's how they'll know that you can actually do the job. So let's take a look at a few examples here. I'm going to look at my screen. So the first one here says, if you're going into a tech sales role, for example, you might be asked, what are your sales metrics, right? And how do you achieve target metrics? Because when it comes to sales, typically companies need employees to meet metrics. So if you're going into a sales role, you should be able to explain how you meet your target metrics for that role. So that would be considered a technical question for a sales role. So technical doesn't always mean technology. It just means it's more like hard skills, something related to actually performing the job in that role. If you're going into project management, an example would be, what approach or what project management methodology do you use to manage projects? Because there are different methodologies. You have waterfall, you have agile, right? And even now you have different types of agile. So they may want to know which approaches or which methodologies you've used, because maybe they want to know if it aligns with the technology, with the approach or methodology that they use in their company. So if you're in the project management space, that's something you should consider. Okay, let's see here. The next one, help desk. So let's say you're going into a help desk role. It might say, what process do you follow to address customer issues? So if you're going to go into IT help desk, for example, you're going to be taking a lot of phone calls. You'll be troubleshooting issues for customers on the phone. Maybe they have password issues or something on their computer isn't working. Typically, there'll be standard operating procedures, SOPs, that a help desk person needs to follow in order to meet or address the customer's issues, right? So from a technical perspective, they may want to understand that process, and they may want you to walk them through how you would maybe troubleshoot a specific type of issue that's common in the help desk in the area. So that's another example of the technical area there. Okay, someone says they can't see the slides. If others can see, let me know, because some other people are saying, so you might need to refresh your browser. Okay. All right. Now, another example is for IT cybersecurity audit, because I know some of you mentioned that. A technical piece would be, what controls do you have experience testing, and explain to me how you will test them. So again, this goes to show that you do need to know how controls are tested for audits, right? Regardless of the standard. And what are the test steps that you would follow? Because if you're not able to explain that, then that shows that maybe you don't know how to do the job. So again, from a technical perspective, you should be able to explain that. And then the last one I have on the screen is risk management. right? How do you manage IT risks in an organization? So again, if you're going into the risk management space, a lot of what you'll do, if it's IT risk management, a lot of what you'll do will be related to risk management, right? So you need to be able to explain to them, what are the risk management steps? How do you address risks that you identify, and how do you mitigate, risks? What are the ways that you use to maybe avoid, mitigate, or any? How do you address risks in general? So that's kind of what you would expect. So again, if you're going into an interview, you have, and that's why I say it's important for you to understand what role you're going into, so that when they tell you they're going to ask you interview questions that are technical, you have an idea of what it is. And to summarize, the technical questions are more related to the hard skills, the core skills that you will need to perform that job. So if you guys get that, say, got it, got it, got it. Hi, Terry, we see you. So if you guys got it, let me know that you got it. Okay. So technical interview questions, you have to be prepared for them, because really this is what companies and managers will use to assess whether or not you have the ability to do the job. Okay. So let me see you guys in the chat if you got it on the technical interview questions. All right. Got it. Got it. I see you guys. Awesome. Awesome. So the next type of questions that we have behavioral interview questions, all right? And these are typically related to the soft skills. So this is why you want to be a well-rounded candidate. A well-rounded candidate is one that just doesn't know, that not only knows the hard skills and the technical aspect, but they also have soft skills that will enable them to be effective in the job, okay? So for example, a very key one would be, tell me about yourself. It's not really a technical question. You can include technical skills in your response, but just tell me about yourself, right? So that's more behavioral. They're trying to understand how you express yourself, how you describe yourself, and how you describe your skills. Another one that you'll typically see would be, what are your strengths and weaknesses, right? Because again, they're trying to know you. They're trying to know what areas, maybe your areas of strength are the things they need, or maybe your areas of weaknesses they don't really care about because it's not relevant to the job. But those are behavioral type interview questions that you could get. Another one would be, have you worked on a team before? Again, it depends on the role. Remember, we're talking about different roles in this challenge. So it's not just one particular type of role. So depending on the role you've worked in before, have you worked in a team? Because sometimes maybe you're a developer and you've just been coding and developing. You were the only person in your organization that did that particular application. So maybe you didn't really work very well with teams. They just want to know that, because if it's a team-oriented environment, they want to know that you have the ability to work well and communicate well with the rest of the team. Okay, another question that we have here is, for project management, what's your experience managing people or projects, for example? Because if the role has some supervisory responsibilities, they're trying to understand if you're able to supervise people. If it's project management, maybe they want to understand how you manage projects, right? And how do you communicate with stakeholders? Communication is key. So even though you want to say you want to go into tech, sometimes people think, oh, I want to go into tech because I'm an introvert and I don't want to talk to people. Well, that's not really true, because depending on the role you go into, you may very well have to communicate sufficiently, a lot of times with people. So if that's a role where you might need to manage different stakeholders, they definitely want to know that you have great communication skills and that you will be able to speak with stakeholders, manage stakeholders, and things like that. Okay. And then the last one, example that I have on the screen is, how do you handle stressful situations? Because work in general can be stressful. Some are more stressful than others. So they want to know, okay, is this person that we're going to hire here be able to manage different stressors in the organization? Again, you do not want to go into an interview saying, oh, I don't manage stress well. Please don't do that. But generally, they're just trying to understand your capacity, right? What's your bandwidth? How are you able to absorb issues and address them with some level of emotional intelligence without like just breaking down? Because at the end of the day, it's a two-way street, right? That's something you have to remember when it comes to interviews. They are interviewing you, but you are also interviewing them. So they want to make sure, because they know what their environment looks like. So they want to make sure that when they're interviewing you, that you will be a right fit for their environment, but you are also interviewing them, because based on the questions they ask you, you should be able to kind of understand what kind of environment that is. So you are also trying to determine if that's an environment you want to work in. Because if, for example, they tell you this is a very high stress environment, we always have things going on, we work no, there are no restrictions on hours, we can call you anytime, maybe that's not a job that you want to do. So that's something that you also have to consider. So those are some examples of behavioral questions. So let's see in the chat. If you guys got it, say got it, got it, got it for behavioral questions. Again, to summarize, we have two types of interview questions. You have the technical interview questions and you have the behavioral interview questions. With the technical interview questions, they're more about hard skills, the skills you need to actually do the job. And with the with behavioral questions, they're more soft skills. They're just trying to understand your other interpersonal skills that you have that will help you be effective in the job. Okay. All right. I see. Got it, Charlie. Awesome, Mama Aramide. Awesome. So you guys now know that as you go out there to prepare for interviews, you want to prepare for both technical questions and the behavioral questions. Okay. So let's keep going because I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A later. So let's talk about interview prep tips. Okay. I really love this because sometimes people don't really prepare well for interviews. So I think these tips should hopefully help you with that. Okay. So let me make this bigger so you can see the screen. The first thing I want to cover is, what are the benefits of interview preparation? Because there's some people, believe it or not, they think winging an interview is okay. Winging an interview is never okay. All right, guys? Winging an interview is never okay. But the benefit of actually preparing ahead for an interview, I'll give you three key benefits. One is it builds your confidence because the more you prepare for your interview, the more you feel like you've got it, the more you feel like you know the material. So you just have more confidence. And when you're going into an interview, that's nerve wracking, right? The reality is pretty much everybody can get nervous for an interview. So if you don't prepare for an interview, you have that extra level of stress on you. So you don't have that confidence, right? But if you have actually prepared well for your interview, it takes down that stress level and builds your confidence because you feel like you've got it. You feel like you've practiced. You feel like you know what it is they're going to ask, right? And so in the chat, let's make this interactive. Have you ever gone into an interview where you didn't prepare before? How did that make you feel? So let me know in the chat as I keep going through the slides because just let me know in the chat. How did it make you feel when you went into an interview without preparing? Another reason that it's important to prepare for, another reason that it's important for you to prepare, or another benefit of preparing for interviews, is that it helps you to identify your knowledge and skills gap so that you can prepare even further. What do I mean by that? If you've started preparing for an interview and you start to notice that you're not really answering some questions right, some sample questions you've put for yourself, then that means that, you know what, maybe I'm not ready for this interview. Maybe there's some areas that I need to prepare more for. So now that you've identified those gaps, you are able to go back, right? Prepare additionally to close those gaps. Okay. And the third one is, the mock interviews can give you constructive feedback on how to improve. So I tell students in my program, for example, that get a mock interview partner so that you are asking yourself questions. But also in my program, for example, and I know other coaches probably do this, is we have mock interview sessions so that students can speak up. Because when you speak up, right, and you practice, other people can give you constructive feedback that you can take to go prepare and fine tune your preparation. Okay, I see. So in the comment, I see Karen said nervous. Yeah, you will be nervous if you do not practice for your interview. All right. So Fabulous is asking, what if it's short notice? Whether it's short notice or long notice, you still have to do some sort of preparation. And if for whatever reason, if you have the ability to actually ask them to push it out so that you can practice more, then I always say ask and find out if that's possible. There's nothing because if it's short notice and you don't prepare, and it's not like you've been preparing ahead of time, what's the point of really doing that interview if you're not sure, right? So I always say try as much as possible to prepare. So even if it's short notice, whatever that time that you do have, use that time to prepare. Okay, use that time to prepare. All right. So Now, again, three benefits I'm going to summarize of preparing for your interview. It builds your confidence. That's absolutely important. It helps you to identify the skills or knowledge gap that you have, because as you're practicing, you'll notice the areas where you're not speaking well, right? And then you need to go back and study further to fill those gaps. And then lastly, if you do your mock interviews, then you should be able to get constructive feedback from those helping you with the mock interviews so that you can actually improve yourself further. The more you prepare, the more you do mock interviews, close the skills gap, the better your chances are of getting the job. Because let's not lose sight, okay? Let me come here on screen. Let's not lose sight of the reason why you're doing the interview. The reason you're doing the interview is to get a job, right? So that's what you really need to think about. What do I need to do? How hard do I need to prepare in order to get the job? That's the bottom line. Okay. All right. So Fabulous Z, I'm not sure I understand. You say what if they say it's a call and not an interview? Okay, so let me just tell you this. Anytime a recruiter or a hiring manager contacts you for a call, think of it as an interview. Okay, I've made that mistake in the past before. Someone said, "Oh, I just want to chat about your experience." It was a full-blown 45-minute chat interview. So whenever you've put in an application, so that's a great question. Whenever you've put in an application, let me show this question so you all get this. Whenever you've put in an application and you get called regarding that application, and they say, "Oh, we just want to talk to you," it's just a call. Whatever it is, just handle and prepare for it like an interview, because the reason they're calling you is to find out whether you're a good fit. And so that qualifies as an interview. Even though they don't title it an interview, that's what it is. So you still need to prepare. Believe me, I've made that mistake before and it didn't go well because I wasn't prepared for it. I thought it was a call. This happened several years ago, right? So now anytime someone says a call, I know it's an interview and I prepare accordingly. All right? All right. So, yep. And someone said it's a trap. The call is a screening process. Well, yeah. I don't know whether it's a trap, but maybe they just, maybe they expect everybody to know and be well prepared on a call, right? So, because the reality is, if you've done the job, if you've practiced, if you have acquired the skills, right, you should be able to confidently answer on that call. But again, whether it's a call, whatever they call it, you prepare for it like an interview. Okay. All right. And Karen said she's had that happen before. Yes, it happens. They may not have bad intent, right? They're just saying they want to talk to you. You, as the participant, as the person looking for the job, you're the person that knows that I need to prepare for that call. So I put my best foot forward. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. Great questions. I'm glad you guys asked that. So let's talk about three key interview tips, right? There are a lot of tips out there. And again, I was looking at the time, I said, what are the key ones that I really, really want to cover for today? And there are three main ones that I want to ask you to always remember. Always, always remember. Okay. So the first one is you want to study the job description. Have you guys seen a theme throughout this Break Into Challenge week? We've talked about that job description so many times, and it's because it's key. Like I told you guys on day 1 and day 2 and day 3, the job description is nothing more than a cheat sheet, right? That is the cheat sheet telling you what they're looking for. So if you're going to use it in navigating the job search process to identify the skills you want, if you're going to use it while you're preparing your resume, right, to make sure it's aligned, you definitely need to use it during the interview process as well. So make sure you study that job description. And then the next thing is you also want to make sure that you study your resume. Sometimes people put resumes together and they don't go back to look at it. What resume did I submit for this particular role? So you want to make sure you're studying the job description and the resume. And what's the reason? Because those are places where they're probably going to ask you questions from, right? They're going to ask you questions about whether you can do the job or if you have the skills that they listed in the job description. And they're also going to verify the information you have on your resume by asking you questions. So if you said you had experience XYZ on your resume, you should know that it's game for questions. They can ask you any question about your resume. So please, if there's anything that you take from here today, when you're preparing for interviews, there are two key things that you must prepare with, right? Study the job description and study your resume. There's no way around it. And the last one is, I can repeat that 100 times. If I wanted to, I'll just repeat practice, 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 and then I'll say it 100 more times, practice, 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 and 100 more times, because there is no substitute for practicing. Can you put this in the chat for me? No, just say practice in the chat, okay? There is no substitute for practicing, regardless of whatever they call it, whether they call it a call, whether they ask you if you can talk to them tomorrow. There is no substitute for practice. If you've got that, I want you to type practice, practice, practice in the chat, okay? Practice. Charles, I see that, because there's no substitute for it. I can tell you this: if I get called for an interview tomorrow, even with all my years of experience, you better believe that I will be practicing today, because it's not just about having the knowledge, it's about preparing to showcase that knowledge, right? So sometimes, have you ever been in a situation where you actually have the knowledge, you know it, but when you go into the interview, you freeze up, you can't really talk about it? Sometimes it's because maybe you really didn't practice. And I know some people, they might just have nerves and things like that, but generally it might be because you really didn't practice. So you need to really consider going back and practicing, 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 to get rid of the nerves, to make sure you've got what it takes for you to respond to the questions and to feel like you really have that confidence to nail the interview. Okay, I'm looking in the chat. Practice, practice, practice. I see you guys typing, so you guys have got it. So these are the three key interview tips I'm going to leave with you, because honestly, these are the most important ones right now. You have to study the job description, study your resume, and practice. All right, so let's keep going here. A bonus interview tip that I have for you, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but you can also use ChatGPT and other AI tools to help you prepare for interviews. So you can literally go into ChatGPT and say, I am preparing for an interview for a project management role. Give me some examples of questions. Now, a big disclaimer here. ChatGPT has been known to be wrong. ChatGPT does not have all the knowledge in the world. It's just given based on what it knows on the internet, which of course can be limited, right? So I don't recommend that you only rely on ChatGPT. Maybe ask ChatGPT for the questions, but when it comes to the actual answers, make sure you verify that with a known source that tells you that those answers are correct, because ChatGPT can give wrong answers. So you can use it to ask you questions, and then you make sure that you have the right responses for those questions. Okay, so regardless of the field you're going into, ChatGPT can help you come up with questions, but the responses may not be accurate. So make sure that you're verifying the responses and you're not out there just saying what ChatGPT said, which is absolutely wrong, and then you're wasting your interviews. All right, and I see in the chat, yes, someone said practice. Your opportunity meets prepare. It's best that the opportunity meets preparedness. Perfect. All right, so it looks like we're doing good here on time. We still have a few slides to go, and then we'll have our Q&A session. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here today before we go into the Q&A session is the STAR approach to answering interview questions. So what is the STAR approach? I'm glad you asked. So the STAR approach is a method that you can use to actually answer interview questions. Some interviewers, they want you to use the STAR approach as opposed to a generic approach. And I'm going to walk you through an example so you see what that looks like. But first of all, let me start with what STAR actually stands for. S means situation, which means you want to provide the background of the situation. T means the task. What was your responsibility, or what was it that you had to do to complete that task? A goes for action, what you actually did. And R is the result. You're summarizing the result of completing that task. And the reason interviewers like this is if people walk them through examples in this method, they are able to easily understand the experience that the person has. Let me walk you through an example, because sometimes people think of this as theory and they're not able to practicalize it. So there are a lot of words on this slide, I know, but I just wanted to show you an example so that you have a good understanding or an approach to using STAR. So the example I've chosen for this is an interview question in the project management space. And the interviewer has asked the question, tell me about a project you've completed. So what you don't want to do is say, oh yeah, I completed a project about website development and that's it. Right? No, you want to break things down. And that's what I've done for you on the screen. So you can apply the same approach to whatever field you are going into. So in this case, the situation will be you actually say something like, I was responsible for managing an application development project for a new application for the IT team. Okay, so you are providing the background on the situation. That's what you're saying. It's a new project for an IT team, and I was responsible for managing the project. The second one is the T, right? The task. This is where you then say, my responsibility was to ensure that all the requirements were documented. I had to track the development life cycle, communicate with key stakeholders, and ultimately ensure the timely completion of the project. Okay? So if you guys are seeing and understanding this, please let me know in the chat. So by going into that level of detail, you're showing the interviewer that you actually know what it takes to work in this role. And then you take it further with the actual action. So you've said what the task was. Now you want to talk about the actual action that you took. And so in this example, it would say, I created a project plan. I assigned all the stakeholders and developers their various tasks. I held weekly meetings to keep track of the project status. And I followed up as needed throughout the week to ensure that all issues were being addressed. So tell me in the chat, if you were the hiring manager, do you have confidence that this person has actually managed a project before? And the final one, while you guys are responding to that, is the result. And it says, even though there were some issues during the project, my organized approach with the project plan ensured that we were able to complete the project in a timely manner. Are you guys tracking? So you were able to show that you understood the situation, you described the situation, providing the background of the type of project it was. You talked about the task, right? What your responsibility was. You talked about the actual action you took. And then you talked about the result, which is you stayed on track with the project and it was completed timely. So, as an interviewer, how do you feel about this approach? If someone answers the question, tell me about the project you've completed. If someone answers with this level of detail, how would you feel? Will you feel confident that they know the job, or will you feel that they don't know the job? So let's be interactive. I want you to answer in the chat because this is what most people are missing. Another person will go into the interview, and for this question, all they'll say is, oh, yes, I've completed several projects. I've done application development projects. I've done website development projects. I've done coding projects. But that's not really given a lot of detail. Do you understand? If you're not given enough detail using this approach, you are not showcasing that you actually can do the job. And so by using this approach, the reason interviewers like it is it really helps them to understand what you know. And it's actually good for you too, right? It's not just about the interviewer, because when you do answer your questions with this approach, you are also showcasing your skills and you are increasing your chances of getting hired. All right, I'm seeing in the chat someone says, yes, confident. Yes, they know the job. Exactly, because they've gone into the level of detail. So this is an example, and you can use the same exact approach with whatever role you're going into. If it's sales you're going into, you give an example of the situation, what your task was, how you actually, the actions you took, and the result. If you're in an audit space, you do the same thing. What was the audit? What was your task? What action did you take? What was the result, right? If you're going into help desk for an help desk interview, it's the exact same strategy. The only difference is in the actual words and the content, but the strategy remains the same. If you feel like this strategy is going to really change your game when it comes to the interview, say change, change, change in the chat. Okay, I love this comment right here. So Ade said it's a comprehensive answer that shows confidence. And this goes back to making sure you have the skills. So that's when yesterday someone was saying, well, can I just put stuff on my resume that I don't really know? If they ask you about it during the interview, will you be able to answer that question, right? If you're not able to answer that question, you are doing yourself a disservice. So you need to take the time to actually acquire the skills so that when you're asked that interview question, you can answer with confidence in a comprehensive manner. Okay? All right, I see in the chat, I see you guys saying change, change, change. So you all need to make sure that going forward, whatever role that you're going into, you are practicing and you are ensuring that you are answering questions in a comprehensive manner that shows that you know how to do the job. All right, so practice, 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 and change, change, change. Love it. I see you guys in the chat. You guys are paying attention. Okay. So now I want you to type your interview questions in the chat. We have just so perfect. We're doing well on time. So now we are going to start answering questions for the rest of our time here. We have to stay on track because I promised you guys an hour and I know people have to leave about after an hour. So we're going to make sure we stay on time. So start typing your questions about interviews. So I'm not here doing mock interviews for you, but you ask me what questions you have about the interview process. All right. So while you guys are typing that, let me keep going. Let's do a quick review of what we've learned here today. So today we talked about a senior interview because at the end of the day, all that prep work you've done with applying, with putting your resume together, all that comes down to you doing a good job during the interview. Okay. So we talked about the types of interview questions. We talked about the technical questions and behavioral questions. When we talked about interview preparation tips, the benefits, one of it includes it gives you that confidence, right? It helps you to understand the skills gap and helps you to see what areas you need to improve in. And then we also talked about the STAR approach for interview responses that allows you to give a comprehensive response that shows the hiring manager that you have the capability to do the job, right? So what's the STAR approach again? S is situation, T is task, A is action, and R is result. And we've walked through an example where you guys were able to see exactly how you would approach that in the field.